Hi there, it's Holly, late diagnosed autistic Holly, if you didn't know. I just wanted to weigh in on the big announcement this week, this week being the week of September 22nd, 2025. I usually don't say much about news stories because it takes me so long to process things that by the time I process the information, think about the information, then have feelings about the information, and then think about those feelings, it's history instead of news by the time all of that happens. And I don't, I occasionally have knee-jerk responses just like everyone else seems to, I just tend to not act on those. But I wanted to weigh in this week with the big announcement about the supposed link between acetaminophen and autism. And I will just say I'm not a scientist. I really encourage people to read what the experts and actual scientists have said and read actual scientific studies about this information. And I watched the video from Mike at Autistic AF. His is very informative and his videos are always well researched, and so I encourage you to go check his out. He usually gives sources and everything with his information also. And I can't really give you any information that isn't already out there. I can just tell you what my personal experience is and what I believe to be the source of my autism, and based on the information which I have read that includes scientific studies, and I will also drop those in the description below. So my dad seems to exhibit lots of traits of autism spectrum disorder, and he's never been formally diagnosed. He was born before Tylenol was invented, and his mother also exhibited traits of autism spectrum disorder, and she was also born well before the invention of acetaminophen. So just given that information, I would say that it appears to be a genetic link on that side of my family, at least. There's also documented neurodivergence on my mother's side of the family. My mother's side of the family, they were way more likely to go to a doctor. Just to give you an idea, my grandmother on my dad's side knew that something was wrong when she was having a heart attack because she had to sit down for a minute. That was how she knew something was wrong. She was not likely to go to the doctor for anything, nor were most of the family on that side. And whether that was due to avoidance or, poverty or whatever the case, they just didn't really do a lot of doctor's visits. So the opportunity for diagnosis there was very slim. And on my mother's side, they did go to the doctor a lot. So there was more opportunity for them to be diagnosed. And so there is documented neurodivergence on her side. A couple of different neurodivergencies. So I have, twice the chance of there being some type of neurodivergence, occurring through genetics from either my mom or dad. My dad happens to have sensory processing disorders and migraines, and so that is what I experience. I experience the same type that he experiences. And my mother has some sensory sensitivities that aren't exactly the same as mine, but are similar to, where she has issues with certain food textures, like she will never eat a sunny side up egg. She can't stand the thought of eating raw egg, and she also just, the runny texture grosses her out. But that kind of thing. But my dad, he definitely has an auditory processing disorder that for years they've mistaken as hearing loss. And whenever he's one-on-one having a conversation in a room without distractions, he can hear you just fine. But when you add in the layers of things, you can still be sitting in the same form, configuration, and be unable to hear. And I'm the same way. And I haven't been diagnosed with any kind of hearing loss. So there's those types of processing things. Sensory processing disorder in itself is not qualified. It's not recognized as a formal medical or mental health diagnosis in the U.S. If it was, who knows? I may have been diagnosed with just sensory processing disorder. But my dad and I both have social impairment. I see a lot of the same traits between me and my dad. And so that brings into question the nature and nurture, gene and environment, all of that stuff, could come together in the perfect storm to create the symptoms of autism spectrum disorder. And I've read an article even before I was diagnosed with autism. I looked into PTSD. I did experience one event in my life that gave me PTSD. And I did get over it. It is something that with therapy and addressing the issues, you can resolve the symptoms. So children of people with PTSD can, basically it's epigenetic. They can inherit some of the same traits as the parent with PTSD. Some of the same PTSD symptoms. And yeah, that's another event where it's that intersectionality between all of those things, nature and nurture, gene expression, and environment. So, growing up, I may have, since I interacted with my dad, was exposed to his personality traits, may have adopted some of those personality traits as my own. So there's that. And my mom, autistic Jenny, mentioned that her mother was anemic while pregnant with her. And I will link to Jenny's video also in the description below. And my mother was also anemic while she was pregnant with me. And I'm guessing probably around in the same decade, in the 70s. So maybe early 80s. I'm not sure, but they probably used the same treatments for pregnant women who were anemic. So there's also that. I looked into that. There has been a study done that shows that There is some link to anemia during pregnancy and autism spectrum disorder as well. And so there, a variety of different factors there that it could be. But since autism spectrum disorder goes back to the 1940s, was formally recognized in the 1940s, and, I'm sure existed before that. Linking it to Tylenol is a stretch, to say the least. It's a stretch. So I just tend to look at the information that has the best chance of being proven correct. And, whenever I'm looking at my own family history, seeing different behaviors and patterns going back generations, I have to take that into consideration that this is probably genetic. This is probably something that's just passed down generation after generation through our genes. It's disheartening, though, to see time being wasted on things like pointing the finger at Tylenol or, vaccines. I've always had reactions to different things, like physical reactions, whether it be allergy, is some sort of autoimmune response, I would imagine. I've been tested for allergies, and it's I'm allergic to anything with artificial colors and flavors, additives, preservatives. And I had to be put on a salicylate-free diet. So I just have to basically eat all natural food. So some sort of artificial compounds may cause a reaction. Whenever I was given one of my first sets of vaccines as a child, very young, I had a reaction, so they just didn't give me the rest. So I didn't know this for years. And so I was just going through early life unvaccinated. So I'm just sensitive to those things. I'm sensitive. My autoimmune system is incredibly sensitive. I haven't gone into it in a video before, but I've had different autoimmune things happen, and I'm not encouraging anyone not to get vaccines, because yes, since I became an adult, I got all of my vaccines. So I'm completely good on that. But yeah, I'll have a great big red itchy spot for a week, and it can be really uncomfortable, or my whole body will ache. So depending on, what it is. So, and my dad has the same types of responses with the whole full body ache because of the vaccines. But that doesn't mean that whatever I'm being vaccinated against wouldn't be 100 times worse or, fatal. So I will just continue to take my chances by staying vaccinated. But just given the information that I wasn't, except for that one as a kid, I think that can be ruled out in my case as well. So, at least that one round. I don't know if it was just one shot or one round, but she just told me that recently. And I don't have a copy of my paperwork to look it up. But So anyway, I still think that genetics, play a huge role in mine, the biggest role in being autistic. And I hadn't even thought about, before I started looking into neurodivergence as a diagnosis for myself, before I got assessed for autism, even I didn't even think about it until after it was confirmed. That probably means that one or both of my parents were neurodivergent. And so I started, after kind of reevaluating my own life and reframing things in the context of being autistic, I started thinking about my parents when I was a kid and different things that happened that could, especially with my dad, that could have been qualified as a meltdown. Maybe even a shutdown or two. But I definitely look back now and I think that he was having a meltdown. And I think that's that's why he would seem so calm and flat most of the time. And then just, I think, and not just bottling it up. I think that was definite not just bottling things up until he blew up. I think that he was probably just overstimulated and had a meltdown. And then the jobs that he worked in, the ones where he was working alone as an electrician, he may have been less likely to experience overstimulation and may have been less likely to experience sensory overload, being, on his own most of the time. But when he was working as an industrial mechanic, that probably led to a lot of overstimulation. I can only imagine. Even though later on that he worked at a place that, did require ear protection, but still being, with the lighting and the sounds and interacting with lots of people, I can only imagine. So, there's just lots of things that I had to think about after being diagnosed about my own parents and my own family, and that's really making me think about things a little differently, because I know that parenthood would not be a good thing for me. As far as management of my own symptoms, it would make it incredibly difficult for me to manage my symptoms. So they were going through life, are going through life, undiagnosed, if they have anything. That's a if with my mom, and for sure with my dad, and unaccommodated. So going through life with no accommodation, I can now explain some of the things that went on. Some things, are excusable, other things are not, but still, it definitely helps looking at them and through that lens. It helps, I guess, extend that forgiveness and makes their situation a little more relatable. But anyway, that's what I've got for now. And that's just my experience and where I believe my autism originated.